This message is brought to you by Apple Pay. Forget your wallet? It's all good because with Apple Pay, you can pay with a simple tap of your iPhone, the wallet you never forget, at millions of places worldwide, including websites, apps, and anywhere you see the contactless symbol. Security is built in with Face ID, so you don't have to worry about your cards getting lost or stolen. And the best part, you still earn the card rewards, points, and cash back you love. So say goodbye to the billfold, add your card to Apple Wallet, and start paying the Apple way. Terms apply.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me on the other line, my Scottish friend, it's Andy Greenwald.
Am I your Scottish friend?
Well, you do the best Scottish accent.
That's quite kind. That's quite kind of you. Should I do the whole pod that way? I think it'd be great. It'd be great.
Can you just do Scottish accent? Now I can go elsewhere.
Sure. That's great.
Greenwald, we are virtual today, but that doesn't mean we're not super close when it comes to monitoring Hollywood, the output of the television industry, the comings and goings of various megacorps being split into two. So today we're going to talk a little bit about this Warner Brothers Discovery story to the extent that you and I, with our mass fortunes, understand it. And then a little bit about Alien Earth, which is the FX show coming in August from Noah Hawley about, guess what, Alien. And then we're going to wrap up Department Q. At the end of this episode, I chatted with Alan Siegel, who's got a new book about The Simpsons coming this week that I hope everybody goes and checks out. I can't wait to talk to Alan about The Simpsons.
Can I check in with you about one thing before we get into our full slate?
Sure, man.
So last week when we were podcasting, as we often do, you asked me if you, as you know, in the role of not just your co-host, but as your friend, if it was time for you to start buying Philly's Red October merch.
Yes.
In anticipation of another wire-to-wire first place in the NL East run, and obviously a deep run into the postseason. I just wanted to note for our listeners who maybe aren't, insane Philadelphia sports heads, that the Phillies have not won, I don't think, since you asked me that. And not only have they not won, Bryce Harper can no longer move his hand in a baseball-related manner, and Jesus Luzardo can't not give up hits and runs. So I just want to give you a chance to speak to the people about this.
Fortune favors the brave. You know what I mean?
And the Braves.
And the Braves and the Mets. I hear you. And I see you.
Thank you.
And I'm listening and I'm thinking, I understand that was not actually me sending out a battle cry that the Phillies were going to be returning to the playoffs. I was thinking of a get rich quick scheme where I could go and buy a bunch of merch for Red October, because I don't think the Phillies are going to change their postseason slogan anytime soon. They've really hit on something. And so if you buy all the Red October stuff in June, and then you're the Red October guy and people have to come to you, do you know what I mean?
This is also, by the way, part of your sort of galaxy brain attempt to really muddy the waters about your personal wealth. Because now you're running some sort of selling shirts outside the
Phillies
stadium.
Postseason merch company.
Just trying to skirt tariff stuff.
So, I'm sorry for starting an American business.
You're not the problem. Okay, that is impressive, because just otherwise it was giving me really big driving you back to college from Thanksgiving and you commenting on the traffic situation on I-95 energy.
What did I do to deserve all my friends being fucking superstitious freaks? If you say there's not a lot of traffic right now, that's not why traffic shows up.
No, but what it does is recalibrate the anxious brain into a position of unexpected peace and calm, because I, for whatever reason, trust you a great deal. I do find you to be a calming presence in my life. So when you're yeah, it looks pretty good, we'll have time to get at least 2 Cinnabons, and then we just drive straight into a brick wall of traffic.
The scene from the opening of Final Destination 2 has taken place.
Regretfully. Yes. And okay, so that was that. The other bit of housekeeping I wanted to get to is that I just wanted to let the people know that I am currently engaged in a Kristen Kish come from behind roar to the finish race to catch up with the current season of Top Chef. So we will be talking about it. I have a lot of thoughts.
FanDuel, stop taking bets on this.
Yeah. I know, shocked, right?
I honestly can't believe it. And to some extent, I'm kind of like, I admire your bravery and I appreciate your effort. But I think if you had told me, Chris, I'm going to give you 11 hours of television watching, I don't know if I would have dedicated it to Top Chef this season.
I am not going to disrespect you or our listeners by pretending that this has occurred during what normally people would call television watching time. I would say the realization that there is a Peacock app on my phone has allowed me to fill heretofore unfilled moments of my day with quickfires.
And would you say that those heretofore unknown, like those moments that you ordinarily didn't watch television, largely, is that where the fathering is taking place? Is that where the parental supervision is taking place?
Again, I don't want to confirm or deny anything. You know, I generally like to be a private person, keep my kids out of the podcast.
Yeah,
did say I have to go brush my teeth, guys. And then my older daughter was like, is that acclaimed molecular gastronomist Wiley Dufresne's voice that I hear? What's funny is you're not sure if I'm kidding about my kid knowing who Wiley Dufresne is or not.
I also just like the idea of you going to brush your teeth and your children only hearing like, oh, God damn it, the risotto's not setting.
I mean, I also sometimes exclaim things, you know, in what might be known as private moments. So yeah, I was way out. I wasn't just out, I was offended, by the first few episodes. And I'm glad I've come back because you can't quit I mean, I've seen every episode of the series, like no joke, I've not skipped one. So to suddenly go cold turkey didn't feel good. And I have some thoughts and feelings. So I will be caught up for the finale, which the final finale, part 2, I believe airs this Thursday. So I guess next week we'll be able to talk about it in full.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the 2 things I wanted to talk about. I think we can keep these pretty tight. Warner Brothers Discovery has split into 2 companies as of today. Slow news.
Well, they've announced their intention to, right?
Their intention
it doesn't
to
happen
do so.
Today. Yeah.
Very, very well played. David Zaslav will be overseeing essentially streaming and studios, which is for our purposes HBO, Warner Brothers Films, the streaming components of the Warner Brothers empire, and then your boy Gunnar, the CFO, is taking over. I think he's starting a new company, quote unquote, that's, I think, called Global Networks, which is dope that people just can't think of new names for companies, so they call it stuff like that.
My guess is it'll have a market-tested name like, I don't know, Tram or something by the time it's done.
ACN. Yeah. That is the dying corpse of cable networks that we've got on our hands, but is still actually a moneymaker. I love this part of modern life where like something is a totally viable business, but it's not sexy enough. So it's just like a tumor living on the side of a company. And can you tell I still pay for cable? Andy, do you have any, to the extent that you're able, like observations about this split?
I'd like to begin by doing something I'd love to do, which is attempting to reference a movie that I haven't seen in 30 years, but you probably have. Isn't it in Cliffhanger? Isn't there a movie where someone's like, like trying to do something and they're bound together, but one person's like, you have to cut me loose? I feel like that's a trope.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at with a lot of these companies. And as much as, I think you've set the table well, which is we actually don't understand a lot of this stuff. We are not financial quants, but we did see this movie before recently with Comcast Universal, which split.
And apparently with Cliffhanger.
And apparently, well, that wasn't recently though. Wasn't your gal from Northern Exposure the female lead of
Turner,
Cliffhanger?
man. Put some respect on her name.
I just didn't want to. I assume that she has some ChatGPT bot scouring podcasts for references to her, so I didn't want her
She's
to
got
waste
her
time if
own
I got it wrong.
Podcast. She has a Northern Exposure recap pod with Rob Morrow.
Really?
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Just. I'm never going to Google anything you tell me on this podcast. Your paintings. It's like I-95 all over again. You're just painting me a more beautiful picture of the world. Anyway. We saw this recently with Comcast, NBC, Universal, where they have spun off basically the less profitable, or at least the businesses that they feel have less room to grow, in order to unshackle the company from the heavy weight that they are they are putting to bear on it. In that case, I think the new company is called Versant, which I thought was a hair product, but I was informed recently that's wrong.
Okay.
So it's a similar story here, and I think we kind of predicted it, or at least the trades predicted it when Max became HBO Max again, in order to prioritize again like the value brand in the equation. Underneath all of this is the fact that when David Zaslav, who is head of the Discovery Networks, purchased Warner Brothers, he did so basically with debt. So the company has tens of billions of dollars of debt weighing down its ledger, no matter what it does, no matter how successful it is in any one of its areas. The thought being, this is a way to kind of split the debt, shed the dead weight and some of the dead debt, and see what's actually possible with the studios, which, you know, again, the whole industry infrastructure is in flux, but there's success there. The question is, can you do this and then do a dramatic move like this, and thus allow yourself to recontextualize what success means for the newly slimmed down company?
I wish I had observations as acute as yours. I just got distracted in my own brain thinking about what would happen if I spun off my holdings from the watch, and what would happen if we had like a split who's Gunner, who's Zaz in this question. Who gets streaming, who gets cable? I think I probably get cable. I spend more time on it.
I think, savvy listeners understand that Stick the Landing was a trial balloon for our inevitable rupture. And, I think we're still pouring through the data we got from that. There's some promising signs.
Yeah.
There's some promising signs, but we're not ready to commit.
Speaking of promising signs, let's talk a little bit about the Alien Earth trailer, because as you may know, I think I've said this publicly many times, Alien is my favorite franchise. I think top to bottom. I have time for every single movie in the franchise. I'm pretty fascinated by I'll be completely honest, as a 47-year-old man, I'm pretty into Weyland Yutani. I'm pretty into the lore. Yeah. I'm pretty into the mythology. So I'm up and down with some of Noah Hawley's TV stuff. I've obviously loved Fargo. Or loved seasons of Fargo. Some I find just good, which is still an accomplishment. But I was very interested to see what his take on this world was going to be, because on one hand, I think there were things that I could see him glomming onto. And then there were some things that I was wondering whether or not he would kind of be like, that's for the movies, or I don't want to do chest bursters. I don't want to do aliens on people's faces or jumping out of walls. At least that's what I figured. What we know about this series is that it's set 2 years before the first Alien film, and that it is set on Earth, as you might have been as indicated by the title. The first teaser came out a couple of months ago, I think, but the trailer dropped last week, I believe, for over the weekend, and I was very surprised, and not in a bad way. But this is a much more action-forward trailer than I expected. And I think it's very wise of them to sell this show that way, because if you had asked me a couple of months ago, like, what do you think is going to kind of be the vibe of this show? I would have gotten into all of the sort of more philosophical questions about humanity versus, robots, or humanity versus, I suppose, AIs, or whatever you want to say. But there's always been a component of synthetic humans, droids in these movies. That's obviously a huge part of the show, but they really put forward a lot more of the traditional, like, Alien is here to scare the shit out of you and to be like an incredible piece of sci-fi action. So what did you think of the trailer, and were you surprised by the vibe at all?
I definitely will talk about the subject or the trailer itself, because I thought it was really, really promising. But what you're talking about is really interesting, I think, as well, which is how much the industry has changed since the last time Noah dabbled in large company IP waters. That was 10 years ago. That was with a show called Legion that I had the pleasure of working on. And what I can say about that time was what interested Noah, what compelled Noah to work on it, was the elasticity and possibility of the idea. Specifically, the idea of someone who might be the most powerful person in the world, or he might be insane. What he had very little interest in, at least in terms of what he brought to the writer's room, he may be fascinated in his spare time, or he may have been thinking big picture what other things he might want to do. I don't want to speak for him. But in my experience in the room for season 1 for that show, we never once said the words X-Men. We never once talked about the larger overstory of beloved IP. We never talked about how this show would or wouldn't intersect with what was then the Fox X-Men universe. Laura Schuler-Donner was the EP on the show. She did come into the room once or twice, but the mandate really did seem to be FX can have a slice of the pie and then just wrap it in plastic, take it far away from the restaurant and do whatever they want with it. And this is and so it was more a Noah show than it was a X-Men show, or it was more an FX show. Things have changed.
Yeah.
Dramatically, particularly in terms of the inescapable value that these enormous IP franchises hold for these companies that happen to have them. So all of that
that's such a good way of looking at it. I hadn't even thought about it like that.
I'm not at all surprised that FX needs a huge blockbuster Alien show as much as Alien needs an auteurish spin on it. So again, not privy to any conversations, have not spoken to Noah about this or anything in quite some time. So I'm not saying he's doing something he's not interested in. I am saying that the stars definitely aligned for everyone to be like, go big, go do this. Don't just carve off your sort of prestige little slice of it and play with it alone in the dark. Make the biggest story you can.
I'll read you the log line, somewhat abbreviated by me, from FX. In the year 2120, the Earth is governed by 5 corporations. In this corporate era, cyborgs and synthetics exist alongside humans. But the game has changed when the Wonderkind founder and CEO of Prodigy Corporation unlocks a new technological advancement: hybrids, humanoid robots infused with a human consciousness. The first hybrid prototype, named Wendy, marks a new dawn in the race for immortality, which is very much the primary concern of the 2 Ridley Scott sequels of Prometheus and Covenant, or especially Prometheus. After Weyland-Yutani's spaceship collides into Prodigy City, Wendy and the other hybrids encounter mysterious life forms more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Wendy is played by Sydney Chandler, who is Kyle Chandler's daughter. Just thought I'd mention that. And then also this show's co-stars Alex Lothar, who we adore from Andor, and Timothy Oliphant, who's one of my favorite actors. So,
have you been thinking about Nemec's Manifesto a lot recently? I have.
I think.
Also, by the way, that's David Risdall, I believe, who made a good impression in the last season of Fargo as the boy genius, the boy tech genius.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I can see. It's not surprising to me that Hawley is fascinated by the lines between a synthetic humanoid, a android, a human, and the sort of like fluidity of those beings and of those ideas. That makes a lot of sense. The idea of these humanoids all being basically the first line of defense against an alien incursion into Earth that is governed by corporations is an incredible blending of the first 2 films, because obviously the second movie, the James Cameron one, is more or less like a Marine war story. And the first one is very much like these people who are getting ground into dust as, workers for this huge corporation. So very, very smart setup here.
Here's why I'm feeling bullish about it. Not just because the trailer is pretty inarguably sick. We should definitely have a drinking game for our listeners where if we say Trojan horse, you get to do a shot. Not
this early in the morning.
For everything I said, well, we don't know when people are listening. For everything I just said about this, being a big, juicy mainstream swing, it seems as if Noah has identified things that are really compelling to him within the larger alien structure. You mentioned them, like the idea of the corporations being at war with each other feels relevant, obviously, and compelling. The sort of first hybrid people sounds really exciting, and not a new idea, but maybe a more original idea for this franchise that you can then play with as the spine of your show while aliens come crashing out of test tubes. Also, the other part of the trailer suggests that there's multiple aliens, not just the famous chest bursters and H.R. Geiger inspired slobbery killers.
Well, these are OGs. These are some of the early versions. Yeah.
The other reason why I'd be bullish is not just the cast, like Timothy Oliphant and Lothar, like you mentioned. This show famously filmed in Thailand and was able to continue filming through a lot of the strike, I think, because of the location and because a lot of the actors hired, I guess with the major exception of Oliphant and maybe Rizdal, were not SAG actors. They were British actors. So, but they filmed in Thailand. And I like the fact that in the trailer, you can kind of see it. It does not look like the show is filmed in the 4 places that productions tend to film these days. I find that really exciting. And then ultimately, I think the reason to be bullish about it is if we're going all the way back to Noah's really surprise coming out party with Fargo, I think we take for granted how challenging of a lift that was.
Yeah. There was a lot of skepticism about that.
It rightfully so, and including skepticism from the Coen brothers. But it is a it is a testament to a very remarkable skill that I think that he has had and has, that he can kind of take in all of the strands that make something popular and run them through his brain and kind of figure out what to take, what to keep, what to change, and how to re-knit them, basically.
Yeah.
That first season of Fargo felt of a piece with the film, but it wasn't completely beholden to it in a way that allowed it to flourish on its own. So if he was eager to re-engage with that part of his brain, then he probably is the right person to make this show.
Let's get into Department Q. How about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this is going to be spoilers for the concluding episodes. We talked a little bit broadly about Department Q last week and our love for it. We're going to try and have Scott on again sometime soon, maybe next week, to talk about the show. But I wanted to get broadly like your thoughts on the second half of the season. So we'll be doing spoilers for the end of this season. So anybody who hasn't gotten a chance to finish Department Q, save this, move on to the Alan interview, what have you. But Greenwald, what did you think about the way that this show kind of concluded?
I'm going to need your help parsing some of this. I stand by every single thing I said last week, which is I loved this show. I loved watching this show. I loved the performances. I loved the production design, the aesthetic, the location, the vibe, the world. I want to spend more time with these people, and hopefully we'll get a chance to spend more time with these people. I mean, the show is set up for prolonged success if possible. Some of that might be dependent on Scott Frank's desire to do more of it, but there are, I believe, 10 books in the series, not unlike Slow Horses. So there's more room, there's more road ahead, and the series definitely ends with a big blinking to be continued implication. Doesn't actually say that. All of that said, it got a bit silly at times, didn't it? I don't know why I became English instead of Scottish. And
Scott's the thing that.
And I know. Well, Matthew Good is doing his best. That's a bit odd, isn't it? Should I do that? It's not quite what I thought it was going to be. This story was dependent on the novel that it was based on. Mm-hmm. And as the second half of the season went on, I started to feel the very evident weight of a story that is told in a very particular way in a book that we should say we have not read. Mm-hmm. But it told in a particular way that is very challenging to do on the screen. Because as we move through the season, more and more of the present day story became dependent on the past, and the past specifically of Merritt Lingard's past, her childhood, the people she knew in her childhood, the roles they played in her childhood. And I think Scott is, we don't need to glaze him further, but like one of the great screenwriters of our time, and certainly a prose pro at figuring out ways to adapt types of story. That said, it at times felt almost Herculean to be like, well, now we're going to show these characters as children. They're going to be, then as teenagers, they're going to be played by different actors. And we're going to linger the camera a little bit longer on a character we've never really met in person's brother, because that brother is going to become enormously important later. That sets you up kind of behind the eight ball when the present day world of the story is so fucking good. Like, let's just ride around the coast with Carl and Akram, just figuring shit out and throwing knives.
Do you know how hard it is, or how rare it is, to put together an ensemble where you are just as happy to spend time with the fourth and fifth characters hanging out together, like Rose and Hardy?
Yes.
When Rose goes to visit Hardy in the hospital room, and in his hospital room, and they're just kind of going through old news stories.
Yes,
that happened in Edinburgh around the time of Merritt Lingard's disappearance. that's very rare to me. You know, like I usually
totally
am
agree
like,
with you.
hey, number one on the call sheet, I want to be with Mayor of Easttown through every scene of Mayor of Easttown. This is a situation where I was like, if Rose and Hardy want to have like just their own adventure that involves them sitting around talking about crimes that happened 4 years ago, I'm totally fine with it. But I completely get what you're saying. Yes, you are asked midway through this show or through this season to all of a sudden be like, the entire thing is propped up by this tragic event that happened between two families on an island off of Edinburgh like a long time ago.
Now, I think there's two ways to look at this. One way to look at it is to pick up on what you're saying, which is, oh my God, what a infrequent miracle we have here with just an absolute banger of a cast and a setup and a world. And mysteries are often, like, if you, as readers of crime fiction, you and I know that, like, you read the series because you like the writing, the world, and the detective, and you're willing to accept that there's a variance of quality of plot across a series of 5, 10, sometimes 30 books. But you just kind of devour them and you enjoy them for the reasons you enjoy them. TV can often function the same way. I think a second season with a different storyline and a different crime, maybe one ultimately more compelling than Merritt Lingard, because I think as the season started to pay more and more attention to her time in the hyperbaric chamber and her past, and like I became increasingly, particularly in the last 2 to 3 episodes, just less interested in that. But there's a version of this where, you know, the story of the second book is so awesome that this show just elevates even further from what is already a pretty high launching place. The challenge,
well, you also
I think,
wouldn't have the first couple of episodes of Carl being a jerk to everyone, not wanting any help.
Right.
You know what I mean? It takes
the team.
It takes about 4 episodes for him to kind of come around to Akram and Rose and start relying on Hardy a little bit more and yada yada. So it's like, you know,
I agree.
I completely think the second season could be lean and mean.
I think the challenge, though, is something that we've been talking about. I think it's interesting, actually. I hope the listeners do. I think it's interesting that we've been talking about this more and more, which is the challenge is the way modern TV gets made. This show is on Netflix now. As far as we know, and maybe Scott would have breaking news for us when he comes on the podcast, it has not officially been renewed. Does he want to do more of this? If you listen to him on Mark Maron, which I really recommend our listeners do, he's basically like, I fought doing this for a while because I had other stuff on my plate, and even went so far as to collaborate with a bunch of people before kind of, it seems like, nudging them aside and grabbing the wheel. So does he want to do it again? And if he does, what's the time frame? If they green light it today, then the show is coming back in 2027. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't mean I wouldn't be excited to see it. I just feel like there's a lot more variables for something that just, it feels like a miracle, but it's only a miracle in the modern day.
I wonder whether or not this is something that they could do. You know, they did 9 episodes of this. I think that there is a lot of, could this be, I don't know, Netflix does not need a Slow Horses, but if they wanted one, they got
this should be it. I couldn't agree with you more. Like I would, if there were 9 more episodes of this show up this week, I would revise my statement about finishing Top Chef. Like I would watch more of it.
Yeah,
and I feel a little churlish leading with my kind of slightly off kilter feeling about the back half of the season.
Because
I love the show.
You touch on a really good point, which is the things that, like, if you're reading a detective novel, let's say Raymond Chandler is a really good example. Mm-hmm. Often in Raymond Chandler novels, the reader themselves is like, I do not know what is going on. Even as everything is being explained to me at the end of the book, I still don't really know what's going on. There is conspiracy after conspiracy laid on top of each other. New characters get introduced.
Coincidence on top of coincidence.
Yeah, and like you can feel the fixes where it's like, actually, it was his war buddy who he'd always hidden from view. Mm-hmm. You know, like there's always like this sort of late breaking silver bullet that kind of answers everything. You don't read Raymond Chandler for plot, although some do. You read it for atmosphere, dialogue, worldview, morality. Like you read it for the broader ideas at play. And I thought that the way that Department Q dealt with some pretty like gnarly subject matter, and wound up being my feel good show of the year.
I know.
Because I was like, fathers and sons and stepsons can like find common ground,
and lodgers,
and it's
too.
cool to date your therapist, and like let's just all be a team.
What are boundaries, really?
Yeah. And I just felt like this thing, it made me even more excited for the future as much as I enjoyed this season. I agree with you. I probably don't ever need to see anything ever sent in a hyperbaric chamber again.
Yeah, it just got tough. I mean, I think that that struck me as a very interior storyline and again, we could be wrong. Like the book could be told completely in the third person without, omniscience of what Merritt is thinking, and it somehow got by anyway. Okay, we don't know. So we're speaking out of our asses here. But it struck me as a very, very interior storyline. And it also, because of that, meaning that it's happening inside of Merritt's head while she's enduring this torture.
And she's trying to figure out, she's going through cases and being like, what did I do? What did I do?
Yes. Yeah. And I think, again, Scott did some creative work to make it come alive. I mean, the aspect ratio of the hyperbaric chambers was different than the rest of the show. There's a hallucinatory element to the pressure building. Ghosts appear, images appear, people are taunting her, talking to her within it. All of that very creative aesthetic work was done to kind of support something that felt on screen less weighty than the rest of the show. And it had me being like, it took her 4 years to think of like the inciting incident of her adult life. Okay. Also, by the way, on the other side of that, maybe it's just a testament to the hardiness of the Scots people, but 3 months after being freed from 4 years of captivity, she's like, I think I'll go sort myself out for a while. Maybe go up to the coast. Some beautiful locks. Drink an iron brew.
Maybe that was just like her experiences with like air pressure has changed her fundamentally, and she's like, now I feel like I'm a well balanced person.
Like 3 months after a bumpy flight, I'm still not myself again.
Do you ever get back on a ferry if you're Merritt?
Oh, do you think? I don't know if you ever go scuba diving again. No. Don't blame the ferry. I mean, do you think Moira lent her the copter to get back to Moore?
A couple of the hanging threads I just wanted to mention because these could come up in future seasons, but I'm also quite interested in them. There is still some ambiguity, I guess, around Carl's shooting.
It's nice that I feel like I cavalierly said last week, it'll all be one story. I'm glad that it was not.
I was wrong too. I thought there would be a lot more unity in the two mysteries. 2 is Moira's burgeoning arachnophobia, which I thought was great.
Yes, and also the other element of that was the implication with Moira and with Stephen Burns that they are not altogether clean, but nor are they villains. That there is something. They're more pages to turn. Which is
very Slow Horses. That's
I like that.
Scott Thomas and Slow Horses, who's like, I'm your friend to some extent, but I'm ultimately looking out for myself.
It's also good TV fodder because there's somewhere to go with the characters. No one got taken off the board.
I also feel like Graham Finch looms.
Yes. Oh, right. Of course.
As a big bad that could come, could be like Mork's adversary.
Do you want to speak at all to the etiquette of entering a private golf club and throwing clubs out of the window? Like, did that?
I don't know if you know this about me. I'm largely a municipal golf course guy. So sorry, I'm not.
Wow.
I'm not tucking the shirt in. I'm not participating in those institutions.
Just man of the people out here, going to municipal courts, selling off-brand fanatics outside of Citizens Bank Park.
Guys, I don't have any used balls to sell you, but I would like to sell you this used Bryce Harper.
I promise you
Homer Hanky.
This square of AstroTurf was once trod upon by Juan Samuel. I promise.
Andy, I'm going to jump into this conversation with Alan Siegel about his Simpsons book. But do you have any like, you're showing the Simpsons to your kids?
Yeah, I'm sorry I can't join. I just did one. Just last statement I want to make
about Spartan Q.
Yeah, just Akram, like now on the Mount Rushmore of side characters currently on television. Like just an exceptional marriage of performance, writing, style, vibe, and hand-to-hand combat
and jiu-jitsu. Yeah.
God, great character. Okay. Yes, my kids, I'm sorry I can't join. Alan's book looks awesome. I am curious, maybe you can ask him about this. I have 3 takeaways for you quick. Showing Simpsons to my children, awesome experience. Still, those first 5-6 seasons that I watched in real time, like still some of the most formative and funny comedy of my life. And it's nice to see that they love them also and get them. Second thing is, did not realize until rewatching them how much of that comedy was written by baby boomers basically making fun of their childhood. And so I have to do things like explain Mayberry to them, just like things that are predate us that we did, but we got because there was more of a monoculture then. And then the third thing is my younger daughter likes The Simpsons so much, she will sometimes on the iPad just investigate season 34 and say, oh, it's pretty funny. And then showed me one.
So when your daughter's like, I'm going to go brush my teeth, and then she's just watching season 34.
I hear Kent Brockman reading the news. She showed me the Simpsons White Lotus parody. And I got to say, and I've heard tell that there's some like younger writers working on it. It might be funny again. The new episodes have not met the bar for me. So I'm curious how he feels about that.
That's a classic AG kind of, let me leave you with a little bit of a sour taste.
A little spice.
Simpsons, are we sure it's good? I'm out.
It's the opposite of Cesar on the current season of Top Chef, who oversugars everything.
Is this Alan? Are you jumping in live right now? Oh my God.
This is terrible. We're doing a handoff. I want to talk to Alan about The Simpsons, but I got to go.
Alan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Andy's got to go, but he was just telling me he was having his daughter has been getting into late period Simpsons.
Oh, nice. By the way, for a second there, I was like, fuck, did I come in the middle?
No,
of it?
not at all. Don't worry about it.
Losing my mind. My best friend has like a 12-year-old, and he was disconcerted by the fact that like a late era Simpsons episode is just as good to him as like one from 1992.
Interesting.
It's
this is not
crazy.
Greenwald's taste.
He's got to do my style, which is I sit her down and I say, here's why this isn't very good.
Andy, I'll see you later, man.
That's what I do in this podcast too. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Okay, Alan Siegel joining me on the watch. Andy has left. We have his book here, Stupid TV, Be More Funny, How the Golden Era of The Simpsons Changed Television in America Forever. Alan, what a delightful book, man. I hope people pick it up. It's out this week. I have a question for you off the top.
Sure.
When I have thought before, perhaps self-indulgently, about like whether I would ever write a book about like a movie or something, a single thing, like a series or a film, I'm like, man, do I have enough in the tank to write about one thing? But one thing that jumped out at me was that when you're writing about The Simpsons, you're actually writing about the entertainment industry, American culture, the way trends worked in our country, both in the 90s and now. And it's like, were you able to just write about everything, but by writing about The Simpsons?
Pretty much. I had tried to sell a Simpsons book years ago, and I just couldn't quite get the idea right. And I think what did it was tying it to the 90s, because it's such a tidy narrative. So you start in 89 when the show premieres and you go through the end of the 90s. And it's kind of like those two things, The Simpsons and the 90s, are inextricable. Like you can't really tell the story of one without the other.
You and I had pretty much mirror image experiences with this show. I think I'm a little older than you, but like the same experience of this show coming on. I think I even do remember it from Tracy Ullman, although I can't be certain. So it starts out as a series of shorts on, well, obviously it starts out as the comic strip. It was in an LA Weekly. Was the origins of it?
So Matt Groening did Life in Hell, which definitely had elements of The Simpsons.
Right, Bones of The Simpsons.
Yeah, Bones of The Simpsons. And, the idea was that they were going to turn that into a show, but Groening was kind of smart and was like, no, I want to own the rights to those characters. So the legend goes that he just like scribbled a bunch of little people onto a napkin. Right. And he was like, yep, these are the new characters for your show, and let's turn it into something. And it is kind of funny. Like you think of these like creative moments, like they're going to be these grand gestures of creativity, but it's really just like, almost random.
Yeah, just like a kind of like quick tossed off thing. And I do remember though, as The Simpsons sort of started to come out, and then especially after, when would you say the show really takes flight? Like after a season or two? Like what year do we get into like prime Simpsons?
I would say, so the first season is good. It's just like a little rudimentary. And then I would say like midway through the second season is when it really starts to flourish.
Yes. And as it's flourishing, it is bringing with it a new network on television called the Fox News. Not Fox News, just Fox. It was run by Barry Diller. It was started by Rupert Murdoch, obviously. Went through very many iterations over the course of the following decades. But at the beginning, it was like this kind of rebel television network because Reagan had deregulated the television industry. And it was the first network to launch, I believe you say, since ABC in the 40s. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so I'm basically, I don't want to step on every single one of the things I want to talk to you about, but I'm basically trying to paint a picture of you're young, I'm young, we're in school, this new network starts. I don't necessarily remember thinking much about that part, but it was like a new channel to turn to. And the programming was not like the programming on other TV networks. And I know it's not like that now either, but the comedies, especially on Sunday night that they programmed, were kind of edgy and kind of provocative. And I hadn't really seen stuff like that. So like whether you were responding to Married with Children, which obviously had a much more like sexually provocative edge to it, or things that were kind of inventive like Tracy Ullman or like Herman's Head, and then especially in Living Color, there was kind of like I was like 11 or 12, but it felt like a weird, like we were at the vanguard of something new. Did you have that sense? I know you were younger, but like as you were going back and researching, did you get that feeling that this was something like really fresh in the TV landscape?
Yeah. And I think what Fox had the benefit of was they could try shit. Like they weren't a normal network and they weren't in fear of advertisers. So they went out there and did, like, I remember I was into In Living Color before Saturday Night Live. I think it's just because I was young. Like,
I think I might have been too.
I remember like watching the premiere of Michael Jackson's Black or White on Fox one night. And it was just, it was a different time. I mean, the rival networks called it like the coat hanger network because they used to need, the joke was you needed like a coat hanger as an antenna to get it in. But again, that really gave the Simpsons sort of carte blanche to do whatever they wanted.
There is an idea that you talk about early on in your book. It's a quote from one of the writers. I can't remember which one, which is that television is basically the act of giving people what they want. But if you give them something they didn't know they want or didn't know they needed, they will follow you forever. And The Simpsons has obviously proved that to be true with its incredibly long run. This is an idea that I think has kind of been lost in a lot of modern entertainment. It's very risky, obviously, to take just a huge swing. But over and over again, I think over the course of our cultural consuming lives, it's been the thing like Sinners or Inception or whatever it is that is like this breathtaking original take on some really tried and true ideas that winds up really captivating a generation of people. And The Simpsons kind of did that. What do you think it was that The Simpsons was doing that was both old and new? If you can kind of, if that makes sense.
Sure. So for old, I would say it really, like it played on the tropes of every traditional family sitcom from, you know, All in the Family to, you know, anything from the early to mid-century television, you know,
well,
even
all
like,
of the, and a lot of these writers are obsessed with like 60s TV, right? Like they were watching Batman and they were watching,
even sort of Brady Bunch. Like there's a story that I heard just an example of like what kind of guys these writers were, which is, you know, I asked like about the Harvard Lampoon and like what helped it sort of be influential to them to make these writers good at writing TV. And they were like, yeah, like it wasn't high-minded. We'd sit around and watch the same Brady Bunch episode 12 times in a row and break down every trope and every little thing that worked, even when it wasn't funny. And I think so that's the old part. And the new part was sort of their...
Are you saying that those guys invented the rewatchables?
Yeah, back before they could sort of Google everything too. Like they couldn't do half-assed internet research back then. They were like watching reruns.
To be fair, neither do we. Like, we rarely do.
And the new part is sort of a product of their TV obsession. So every episode had, you know, 50 jokes, 50 different references, whether it's to pop culture, to Hitchcock, to Kubrick, to all these movies that we love. And they prided themselves in just making layer after layer after layer. And you see that in almost every sitcom now. Like the best example to me is like 30 Rock. It's basically a live action Simpsons, and 30 Rock now is almost 20 years old. And I think Robert Carlock, who, you know, made the show with Tina Fey, said like, I want to make a live action Simpsons. And again, it created this archetype that is in every show now.
But you can see like there are elements of 30 Rock, like even the things that have sort of like just like walking in, like even the writer's room in 30 Rock of the guy with the mesh hat, like the different characters who are like perfectly drawn comic relief side characters who will come in and do the exact thing they need to do, is like, you can see all of that in The Simpsons with any number of their kind of like of the ensemble there.
Yeah, it's wild too, because again, these guys writing the show, they didn't have any idea they were sort of making this cultural blueprint for future. Like John Vitti, a writer, told a story about, making Lenny and Carl, Homer's friends, just like, it's like, yep, Homer needs friends, so we're just going to like toss him in. And he said like, it almost embarrasses him to think like these are like iconic characters with action figures now. It's insane.
There's also this idea at play that you get into early in the book. I'm about midway through it. So a lot of my references are going to come a little bit earlier, but I think it's useful for people who haven't read it yet, of this idea that The Simpsons was about kids, but written for adults. And this is something that I think about a lot, because in some ways I wonder whether or not like we'll look back on the last, like, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so and wonder whether like, does pop culture infantilize people? Because you often hear that with talk about Marvel Cinematic Universe, or, people listening to the same music at 40 that they were listening to at 20 or whatever it is. And I think that I'm not even referring to like pop music. I think like even the fact that like I keep listening to Pavement is like, have I just decided to be perpetually 19? But The Simpsons was really interesting because you felt like, even though it was about like a boy who maybe looked like you, or a girl who looked like you, and your parents were maybe like Homer and Marge in some way or something like that, or maybe you lived in a place like Springfield, all the jokes were like, I only kind of get this. Like you were like, I get the gag, but maybe not the reference. And that's an ingenious way to write comedy, because then you are always like making new fans, because people are like, oh, that's what that meant 10 years later.
So first of all, I'm wearing a Dinosaur Jr. shirt, so I'm with you. But second of all, like it is sort of, to use the music comparison, it's a little bit like when Nirvana hit in the early 90s and kids started to explore the band and learn what Kurt Cobain's influences were and go and love those bands too. And so The Simpsons is like that with pop culture. So here's an example that I love, I'm obsessed with. In the Mr. Plow episode, there's a reference to William Friedkin's Sorcerer. And it's a movie from 1977 that in 1990...
It's like one of my favorite movies.
It's incredible. Yeah. And in 1992, though, who was watching Sorcerer?
I don't even know if Sorcerer was available in 1992.
No, it was probably not available on VHS, or if it was very obscure. And the crazy thing is, I didn't get that reference until I was 39 years old. Like, that's how much is buried in these episodes. That's a really specific one. But again, like...
No, that's a perfect example, yeah.
I didn't know the movie Psycho when I was 7, but my dad explained, oh, that's a reference to this movie. And it kind of gets you curious about other pop culture.
Do you find yourself more often than not? Have you watched the entire series?
I have watched, I think in its entirety, the first 15 seasons. And then as I got older, I kind of drifted away. And then I'll drop in, like, there was a Boston themed episode, and that's where I'm from. So it's like catnip for me. And I watched some of the Treehouse of Horror ones because they're really creative still.
You got to honor traditions. Do you find yourself, because, like there's so many Simpsons episodes. Like, is it almost like, oh, I'm getting into this season now, or this is an era where this writer took over? Like, you can kind of detect it in SNL, where you can go back and be like, oh, I'm going to watch the Dana Carvey era, or I'm going to watch when this person became head writer. Like, what is your relationship to rewatching The Simpsons?
So when I was working on the book, I was really afraid I was going to watch episodes and just start getting annoyed and not like the show, but it's been the opposite. I mean, like, I try to like be a little judicious with my rewatches, but I found myself like gravitating to the David Merkin years, which is like seasons 5 and 6. And it's really when the show expanded its scope. Like, Homer goes to space, and there's a Citizen Kane parody, like these really immersive, but like joke packed episodes that were like a little faster paced than the early seasons. And that's an example just of like how the show was evolving at the time.
Andy and I often talk about authorship of TV shows. So, sometimes I think we're a little over reliant on it. Like, the showrunner or this person is obviously the creative driving force behind it. One of the interesting things about The Simpsons is obviously it's based on the work of Groening. You've got the influence of James L. Brooks, who is one of the most sort of like safest, most kind of competent pair of hands in Hollywood, and has made so many hilarious but also touching dramas and comedies in the film business, but also has produced tons of incredible TV. Taxi, Simpsons. Did he do Cheers?
No, he was not on Cheers. He was not on Cheers. Mary Tyler Moore too.
Right, Mary Tyler Moore. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
And then you've got like the murderer's row of writers who came out of The Simpsons and went on to do other things. But the person who I was gravitating towards is Sam Simon, whose name I've seen in credits for my entire life, and realized when I started reading your book, I do not know a single thing about him, but it seems like I should.
So the writers kept mentioning Sam Simon as being a genius, which I think he was. And I asked somebody like, what was it? And it was just like, he just made good TV. Like he ran Taxi in his early 20s, which is crazy. And so the writers loved like pleasing him and getting things right for him. And I think, again, Simon was kind of cantankerous guy. Like him and Groening didn't really get along. But what helped the show is that Simon basically was like, oh, we're going to be 13 episodes and done. So like, let's try different stuff. Like, let's make every episode different than the last one, which I think for those young writers was like heaven, like to be able to do that.
The whole point of sitcoms is that you create a framework and then you just pump them out, right? It's not like we strip it down and start with a completely new idea.
Right. You hit them over the head with it over and over and over. And that's sort of what the Bart catchphrases were trying to do.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. So Simon is like kind of a wonderkin who comes out of like, like maybe not golden age of television, but clearly had some kind of like deep understanding of how the mechanics of TV worked. And when people are talking about him in your book, I found it fascinating that he had this he was like a 5-tool player. Like he could do any kind of comedy. He could do physical gags, verbal gags, but he could also do story, and he could also do like episodic structure. So, I mean, these guys all just revered him.
Yeah. Like things like starting an episode with a cold open in an animated show. Like that was, right. I mean, perhaps it had been done a little bit, but it was not done like, The Simpsons, like an episode starting with like a Flintstones theme song parody and Homer driving his car into a tree. Like that was just something that they wanted to try. And also like, I think an underrated thing, like he was hilarious. Like he would add notes to people's scripts in the margins that would like make them hysterical. Like it just tossed off things. Like the one I love is, I think it was Jeff Martin's script, and it's like, Rod and Todd Flanders talking about how, liver and onions was for dinner. And Sam Simon just wrote, iron helps us play. And that was just threw that in there. And, he also was responsible for like the look of Mr. Burns. Like Mr. Burns was supposed to look like Mr. Spacely from the Jetsons. And Simon was just like, no. Like, let me see. And he had some animation chops, just draws Mr. Burns like with a beak, and iconic.
That's amazing. How much longer how long do you think The Simpsons will run for?
Oh man. I think they're going to they could go for another 10 years. I mean, the actors are getting old, and it is a little scary just with AI, like what they could do with those voices.
Yeah. It's not like they don't have enough material to work from.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when the show is canceled, it's going to be the biggest send off in pop culture history. Like I don't think people, it's just such an American institution now that I don't think people realize how sort of revolutionary it was at its start.
Did you get any information or insight into like, is it, because it's streaming on Disney? So Plus. Do you get the impression that it's had like a second life or like a streaming boost?
Yeah. So I think Bill Oakley, one of the writers, said that there was a period, maybe, 10 years ago, when FX sort of became the syndicated partner. It's a Fox partner. And then there was a website called Simpsons World, which like feels very dated now. where, you had to be a subscriber, you had to be a cable subscriber to watch The Simpsons. And then and then when Disney Plus came around, it I think it gained thousands or millions of fans because again, my best friend has, an 11-year-old and he can go on there and choose any episode. And that opened the world for a new generation of, preteens and kids getting into it.
Interesting. Well, Alan, man, thank you so much for joining me, dude. The book is called Stupid TV, Be More Funny. It's from Grand Central Publishing. And it's available tomorrow. Is that right? Or
That's
Tuesday?
Correct. June 10th.
Good luck with the release and everything. And Alan obviously has great pieces on The Ringer that you can find there under his byline. Alan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much, man.
Thanks for listening, everybody. You can get Alan Siegel's book wherever you buy books. It's called Stupid TV, Be More Funny. Thanks to Andy for joining me. Thanks to John and Kaya for producing. We'll be back on Thursday, hopefully with a special guest, but we'll probably also chat about Stick, the new Apple TV show with Owen Wilson, and a couple of other things. Everybody have a safe week.